category as blood and other things. They just have to be washed one time and not with earth. That's a dispensation you could use, and also that will cut off some unfounded misgivings that you might have, and also some extremely difficult situations you may be in if you're in proximity to where things have been affected by filth. What does he mean by the offspring of dogs and pigs, or by them with another animal? Like here, for instance, people who live in rural areas, dogs will mate with coyotes or other animals, and those offspring will have the same ruling as a dog with respect to impurity. And if it's conceivable, back in the day, maybe it seemed kind of like unusual hypothetical fiqh, but like if a dog were to mate with a cat or something, that animal would have the same ruling in terms of impurity as a dog. But nowadays, with like the genetic stuff that they do, that might even happen. They used to mention an interesting question, like if a pig and a human had an offspring, what would it be its ruling from the point of view of purity? And that seems like a far out question, 800 years ago. But nowadays, you might have someone that has a pig heart, and la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. So some of those unusual questions, it's as though Allah inspired some of the ulama, and they discussed them and studied them so that they gave us fundamentals through which we can understand some of the rulings that would later come. So then he mentioned dead animals. What does he mean by dead animals? He means animals which have not been properly, have not been slaughtered, had a proper Islamic slaughtering. Sheikh Nu translates this word as unslaughtered dead animals. Right? So proper Islamic slaughtering, there's a certain process by cutting the two pipes in the neck with a sharp edge by a Muslim and so forth, that will render certain kinds of edible animals lawful to eat. And any animal, whether it's an edible animal or an inedible animal, that dies without that kind of slaughtering is impure, and all parts of it are impure. Its nails, its hair, its feathers, its everything. So the whole, basically, there's a deer on the side of the road that's been hit by a car, and you could meta is the word that you could translate literally as carrion. Everything about that is impure, and remains so, except its hide can be purified by tanning, as we'll revisit, or as we'll visit as we continue. So basically, what does that mean? That means meat which is not slaughtered properly is roadkill. In the eyes of the Sharia, it's roadkill. So we used to joke around these parts, and unfortunately it's not a joke, and it still happens. People say, well, meat used to come to the Prophet ﷺ and he would say Bismillah over it, so then you could say Bismillah over it. We used to call that fatwa Bismillah luckies. You could call it Bismillah roadkill. If you see a deer on the side of the road, you can say Bismillah over it 100 times and it's not going to become halal, because it's roadkill. It's carrion, and essentially haram meat, that's its ruling. It's roadkill. Unless you're trying to eat it to preserve life, it's not going to become lawful, and Allah knows best. And people going around and giving fatwas about that, it's really dangerous, because eating haram, the Prophet ﷺ said, all flesh which is grown from haram, the fire is more deserving of it. And there's numerous narrations of this tradition, and it's sahih. And he also has a tradition in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, someone who travels for a long period of time and raises his hands to the sky saying, O Lord, O Lord. And he said his food, his drink, his clothing, and his nourishment are haram, so how will his prayer be answered? So, when you eat haram, your prayer is not answered for a period of time, and that doesn't just mean improperly slaughtered things or things with haram ingredients. It means even more so, like the earnings you have, because that entails oppression of someone else potentially. But eating haram is a big deal, so it's not a light matter. Being negligent about the halalness of meat and so forth. And also, sometimes people get these fatwas, and it's as though the people giving them don't understand the context. As if you're not going to find any halal meat, and there's Muslims striving making financial sacrifices themselves, and also taking a financial risk to engage in business ventures in this country or in these countries, these non-Muslim countries where Muslims live, in order for Muslims to have halal meat, and then for us not to support them and claim that there's some sort of difficulty and get a slippery fatwa from Allah knows where, saying that roadkill is somehow halal if you say Bismillah over it. It's pathetic from the point of view of fiqh, and it's also pathetic from the point of view of us trying to establish Islam here, and it's not even that difficult. And I mean, there's all kinds of vegetarians around that don't even have Islam in the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ that have chosen an alternative lifestyle. So why can't Muslims sometimes have fish or sometimes have vegetarian when that's the only thing available? And then when it's available, purchase meat that's halal and properly Islamic slaughtered. And otherwise, that's najis, and everything about it is najis. If you know it's not properly slaughtered, there's some detail if you don't know, but it still remains haram to eat. So then there's exceptions to unslaughtered dead. 3 exceptions. One of them is fish, and that you could translate as aquatic life. So anything that only lives in water, and if it's brought on land, it dies or can't live a normal life and dies quickly. We consider that aquatic life, which is has a ruling of fish, and if it dies without a slaughtering, it's pure. It's pure, and it's halal. So the Prophet ﷺ said about the earth that the carrion the Prophet ﷺ said about the ocean, its carrion is halal. Its water is purifying, and its carrion is halal. Al-hillu at-tahuru ma'u, al-hillu maytatu. He said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, about the ocean. So like fish that float up to the surface or get washed up on the beach, you can eat those, and they're pure. And other aquatic life as well. Amphibians are an exception. They're not lawful to eat. And if they died without slaughtering, and they wouldn't be slaughtered, they're impure. But fish are pure, and other aquatic life. Another exception is locusts. And locusts and fish are pure when they die without slaughtering by consensus. The Prophet ﷺ said 2 types of carrion are made lawful for us, and 2 types of blood, fish and locusts, and the liver and the spleen. So he compared those 2 types of blood. Those are organs that are bloody organs. La ilaha illallah. As for human beings, similarly, in the Shafi'i school, a dead human being is not impure. It's not filth. And Allah said, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We have indeed ennobled the children of Adam, the offspring of Adam. And part of that ennoblement is that when the Muslim dies, or when the person dies, they do not become impure. So then a longer list of impure things, and I thought his list was longer, but in any case we're going to add some, inshallah ta'ala. So he mentioned animals and the dead things, and another substance which is impure are liquid intoxicants. So a liquid which intoxicates is impure. Physically and spiritually, as opposed to a solid. A solid is forbidden to consume, an intoxicating solid, but it's not impure. But liquid intoxicants, we understand that from wine being impure. They're impure. He already mentioned any type of urine and any type of dung or excrement. Those are impure. In the Shafi'i school, even if they come from edible animals. In other schools, those of edible animals are pure, and a weak position of the Shafi'i school. Blood and pus and any of the types of liquids which seep from wounds, like the clear substance that comes out and what have you, that is impure. He's already mentioned unslaughtered dead animals, that those are impure. Another ruling that extends from that, is a corollary of that, branches from that in layman's terms, is a part of an animal's body which is removed during its life has the ruling of the unslaughtered dead of that animal. So if for instance, some cattle had a part of its body cut off. When a cow dies without being Islamically slaughtered, it's impure. So that part that was cut off during the life of the animal has the ruling of the unslaughtered dead of that animal, and it's impure. So an animal that's pure when unslaughtered dead, if part of it's cut off, it's not impure. So if a person's finger were amputated, that would be still pure, because the unslaughtered dead of a human being is pure. However, if, for instance, like some types of sheep or something, they cut off their tail when they're small, if that were to happen, then that tail that's been cut off